Your Highnesses, Excellencies, esteemed dignitaries, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Now we will start with the next session of financing new ideas and out-of-the-box innovations, which delves into how creative and strategic risk-taking plays a crucial role in addressing complex challenges in Asia. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Phyllis Kurlander-Costanza, co-founder and president, Outcomes X, who will moderate these discussions. She will be joined by our esteemed panelists, Mr. Abdallah Abu Sheikh, co-founder and CEO, Astratech, Botim, Mr. Lawrence Lien, chairman, Asia Philanthropy Circle, and Kun Vichian Pongsaton, social entrepreneur and chairman, Premier Group of Companies. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists to the stage.
Welcome, and thank you for coming to this session with this fabulous panel. I'm personally very excited to hear about all of the things that they're doing in this space. We're going to be talking about philanthropic innovation, social financing, and how we think about risk in this space. When you think about financial markets, we build risk into them. There's a mathematical equation for calculating risk. And the reward goes up as the risk goes up. It is very different in the social sector. Risk and reward are not necessarily correlated, inversely or not. And when we think about mitigating risk, there's actually even a philosophical debate. Should we be mitigating risk when we think about philanthropic funding or financing? Or is the whole point of philanthropy to take risks? We try to mitigate risk by, in some cases, torturing the nonprofits we're supporting. We do it by doing a tremendous amount of due diligence, having them fill out lengthy applications, and answering a lot of questions. You know, it costs nonprofits $20 for every $100 they raise because we are having them do so much when it comes to filling out applications and update reports that frankly few of us read. So today we're going to talk about this concept of risk, how we think about it, and more importantly, how are we financing social innovation that is so inherent with these types of risks, including financial, implementation risk, and even the risk of unintended consequences. So I'm thrilled to discuss this tension between risk and action with our esteemed panelists. And I'd like to start out with Lawrence and ask you, what is, in your mind, one of the most interesting innovations and out-of-the-box solutions in the social sector that excites you most?
Well, there are many things that are happening which excites me. I mean, one of the things that our members at APC have been doing is supporting pay-for-success models. So pay-for-success, and one of the key partners, they should be in the room because I told them I'm mentioning them, is Tri-Sector Associates. Two of our members launched the first social impact guarantee in Singapore, which essentially is a money-back guarantee for social impact donations. And this is a program providing vocational and soft skills training to youth who are not in education, employment, or training. And it did improve by more than 10 percentage points the number placed in education and employment. So what happens here is that if outcomes are not achieved, so you talk about risk, a guarantor, who is another funder, will step in to pay to the outcome funder. And I think with some of these innovations, you can match those who are more risk-taking to those who are less risk-taking and unlock a lot more capital. But I think that the benefit is not just about the finance part, it's about getting parties aligned on outcomes, achieving to be achieved, it's on the pricing of outcomes, it's on innovation and capability building of the service provider. So that's one.
And to follow on that, this concept of pay for success, and it goes by many names: social impact bonds, development impact bonds, social success notes. In your case, it's a guarantee. Who, in this case, is it just the guarantor that is assuming the risk, or is there some risk also for the implementing organizations?
Well, I mean, everyone is taking a little bit of risk, but it's a different sort of risk because, if you put yourself out there as the implementing entity, I think the main risk is your reputation risk, right? That in case if something goes wrong, right, everyone is watching you because particularly if you are the first few to do it, and you put yourself out there, it can be, it can be quite public, right, if you don't succeed. But I think when you have a proper alignment like this, it was a success. You also increase the motivation. On the flip side, you do increase the motivation to do well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Inherently, when you do something new, everybody's bearing that risk because you will succeed together and you will fail together. Kunvishian, I'd love to ask you the same question about the innovation that excites you most and how risk factors into that.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to establish that my agendas are very much focused on collaboration, and on the other end of the value chain is building human capital, building capacities. So what excites me is that on the funding side, whether it's financial or in kind on financial side, I think platforms that can integrate or bring in non-traditional players or investor to the table. The corporate sectors, for example, in many environments, they're not significant enough players. The general public, large percentage of the general public are not active investors for impact. So these kinds of initiatives excite me the most, but because we increase or we can leverage and build on the added ecosystems of the badly needed interventions that we need to have in the global and local context in Thailand. And in terms of risk, I guess there are two basic dimensions that we need to observe. One is the external risk, in which we need to, the projects, the initiatives need to understand what are the potential external risks and prepare for them. Pandemics, for example, something relatively new for our generation that we have just previously experienced. The other are internal, which include, knowledge, experience, skills, governance, which we can mitigate through building capacity of the people involved by mentoring, coaching, advising, and all that. Yes.
Do you have an example that you can share with us of a collaboration that you've implemented in Thailand?
Sure, just citing perhaps just two. One that include the general public, and they're not totally new and innovative and out of the box. The crowdfunding platform for social investing, which allows new players, new initiatives from the especially from the younger generations, for initiatives for interventions that tackle the various uh, um, gaps and issues that we have, and allow anyone to invest, large scale, small scales. So allowing people to experience investing for social impacts. And through that, learning, we have more and more of the active citizens, of the change makers on the both sides, on the investing side and on the impact implementation side. So that's one. The other one that I'd like to cite is a blended platform of mutual fund with social investment, a fund called Be Kind that we will help initiated, that we brought in the investment sector, the financial sector, the non-traditional players. Of course, they focus on making profits and all that. But this allows them to experience that through their own expertise and the normal things that they do in life, with some minimal contribution back into funding social projects. So that mutual fund instrument can allow the general public and of course the non-traditional players to come into the picture and fund projects that allow the investment bankers to experience investing, impact investing. And through that, we have been able to leverage and extend to another 10 mutual funds in Thailand. Yes.
Wow, I like that idea of the mutual fund. I mean, you could even imagine an philanthropic index fund and things that you could benchmark against. Abdallah, what's your view towards risk in financing when it comes to philanthropy or social investing?
So I think in this part of the world we have a very different view to philanthropy as to the rest of the world. About 1600 years ago, we made philanthropy was made sort of obligatory for this part of the world, and we did not use mutual funds to do it, right? So maybe let me ask an awkward question. How many people did an act of philanthropy this week? No one? No? Not a very generous room, guys. So maybe this month? Yeah. See, so how many people did it through a mutual fund? And how many people thought about risk when they were doing it? So this part of the world, I may be very biased in saying, but we're probably the most generous part of the world when it comes to philanthropy. Given, if you just calculate, if you put the mathematical equation of, we've been given 1400 years of zakah and charity, and it was never a thing about we need to create social impact foundations or businesses or what have you. We sort of think of every organization, business, individual as a social impact driver. And it's not that if you're a social impact organization, you have a responsibility. If you're a bank, it's okay, you're exempt. No. Everybody has to contribute at a certain point, and everybody has a different margin of contribution based on what they do. Now, do you need to de-risk philanthropy? Of course you do, because philanthropy is not objective, unlike what a lot of people think, because unfortunately, it's done by humans, and we have different biases. What is philanthropic to me might sound like it's terrorist to you, or what's philanthropic to somebody else might sound like it's criminal to a third party. So our philanthropy is different by nature. I think, do you need to calculate risk? Risk is a word that comes from capital markets. It's not a concept in social impact. It's not like I go help someone and I think, okay, what's the risk of me supporting them? But I think you need to de-risk the mechanisms through which philanthropy is given, and i.e. the channels. You need to make sure that whatever is flowing in flows out, and that's one part. And then you need to make sure that the delivery point is also secure, in the sense that I am not contributing for a purpose, and whatever my contribution is goes to a different purpose. Those parts need to be de-risked. And the best de-risking mechanism is not to create structures in the middle between the giver and the user, but to actually close the gap between the two endpoints. And at least that's my thinking, is if you bring me as close as possible to whatever I'm contributing to, there is a lot less chance of me having to depend on intermediaries to do that. Because in where we come from, or in our culture, it is the duty of you as the giver to actually validate where your philanthropic contribution is going, and you cannot actually depend on a third party to do that on your behalf, unless you've established an immense amount of trust where this is a sovereign-backed entity or what have you that you can count on. So that's how we think about it a bit more.
How do you think about it when it comes to giving huge sums to myriad organizations?
To what organizations?
To a lot of different organizations. How would you do that as the giver?
So I think the UAE struck a beautiful example in how that could be done. I think from Sheikh Zayed, God rest his soul, to Sheikh Khalifa, to the current leadership of the UAE with Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, they've been, like I said, probably one of the most generous parts in the world in supporting even bigger countries and bigger nations in a lot of their problems. And how you'd go about, like I said, what's a huge sum, right? It's relative. What's huge to one organization might not be very significant to another organization. So I think magnitude is calculated by the size of the problem you are trying to solve. So when we speak about $1 billion, it's a huge sum, but it's not a huge sum when it comes to world hunger, right? And that's how the calculation would go. But I think probably a lot more of the focus should go towards where are you going with your philanthropic action, as opposed to how are you systemizing and how are you creating more and more very expensive tools for people to give philanthropy. Because when you create those mutual funds, when you create sort of bond-like structures, like you said, in Europe they make a charity spend, maybe a non-profit spend 20% of whatever money they raise on just getting to the capital. That's not very functional, because that 20-30% could make a lot of difference had it been used where it should be used.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more. How also, Abdallah, would you nurture new organizations and new innovations in the social sector?
So again, I don't think the social sector is a thing, right? If you are in society, you are a social organization by being. Whether it's not like I don't like the differentiation of saying there are people in the social sector and the rest of us are in some other sector. We share the earth, so we're all in the same society. But I think again, there needs to be certain measures and metrics, and I think a lot of the world can really follow suit of what we're doing in this part of the world towards how do you make each and every individual and organization a social contributor. You cannot throw this burden on Red Crescent and Ma'an and 2-3 other organizations. See, you guys are on your own. Go figure it out. It's not how it works, because if the actual economy movers and if the actual capital markets and if the actual capital mover companies do not contribute, then where are those organizations going to get support from? It does not exist. So, and that is why I feel it became, at least in the West, what we look at today is a very tilted measure of humanity, right? There's a very weird, if you want, metric that measures by, because we see those organizations or non-profit organizations, they're backed by certain financial companies that have certain agendas. And they want to support certain things, but not other things. And they want to support certain regions, but not other regions. And so on and so forth. So unless you create an ecosystem where every person, every company is a social contributor, you'll always have sort of a Chinese wall between social impact and financial contribution. And those things need to be mixed. They cannot be separated.
The concept of service here is a key lesson for me. and how you think about service in this region. It's not a transactional act. It's in everything that we do. And it is a whole system of behaving towards others. And I think that's an important lesson for all of us to take home. Lawrence, you're through the Asia Philanthropy Circle, you're building systems and leadership to meet a lot of these complex societal needs. How are you doing that, first of all? And then how are you nurturing innovations in society as a whole? I'm taking a lesson from Abdallah to solve some critical social issues.
A couple of things, not unlike, I guess, what happens here at AVPN, but with us it's a much smaller group of principals, philanthropists. The first thing is to build community, right? To build trust among people who are working in concert to do things in a better way. And to build a community of like-minded people who are strategic and collaborative. I mean, strategic in the sense of you care about impact, right? You know, and that's the primary driver. And collaborative because we need people to be humble rather than think that they know everything. And then we learn together. You know, we tend to be agnostic about things in life. We don't follow fads, we follow evidence, right? You go around and a lot of the work that we do, we start by looking for the evidence, doing research, being curious about what works, what doesn't work around the world, and looking at what is relevant to our context, and matching that to the need that is out there in society. You know, when we talk about risk, the biggest risk is doing nothing, right? Because the problems out there are so big. Otherwise, and they're so complex, otherwise governments and businesses would have solved it, right? So philanthropists quite often, I make a distinction between philanthropy and charity. Charity must be the DNA of everybody, I agree. But if you define philanthropy, I know we all have different definitions of it. I mean, the philanthropy that I'm talking about is more being the problem solver of some of the most intractable issues. If we don't take risk, I mean, you only get little bits of things done, right? Compared to the size of the problem. So I don't think we have a choice. We have to take the risk in the sense of there is a potential for incredible impact. Although the probability is lower, that's the risky part, right? And to do that, you need to we have a way of catalyzing collective impact. You know, we believe that coming together to bring collective intelligence of the members, each with their strengths, will bring something to the table. Of course, you need things like champions and all that. And it's very iterative. I mean, in terms of experimenting, learning, and adapting. You don't go all in with your capital. You do pilots. We've done a lot of greenfield projects. And you de-risk it also by different people putting in money, so that it's not your entire. I mean, everyone takes a portfolio approach, right? There's some parts of your portfolio, like investing, you take things that are a bit less probability in getting the high impact, you know, whereas others you get a bit higher probability. And that collective pooling, the pooling of the risk, you know, helps people do things that they don't normally do on their own. And then we work together, and I think the last thing I would say is we have to not be fearful of failure and make the partners that we work with fearful as well, because they will start lying to us as funders. The last thing we want is to make liars out of charities, which unfortunately I think funders do on a regular basis, because we don't want to be told things are not going well. We want to have that trusted relationship where we can sit down and problem solve together.
Thank you. It's interesting to hear the different perspectives from each country on how we think about giving back, how we think about service. Kunvishian, in Thailand, what is the concept of service there, and how are you encouraging others to give back? You're supporting a lot of really interesting innovations.
Well, first of all, I have to say that it's still a big challenge. We've been involved with this for many, many years, 30 years. We've made good progress, but the scale is somewhat still insignificant to the challenges that we're facing in our, in our society, being poverty, nutrition, education, environment, and all. So it is important that we bring more people to the table. And it's important that we try to normalize and encourage flow of resources and capacity, financial, non-financial expertise on the one side, the numbers of the general public, and the knowledge of the practitioners in the areas that we need to invest to improve, on social impacts, where they own different sets of expertise and knowledges. And there's a gap between the two, the understanding. So we need to create that understanding, the knowledge, the sharing of resources, so that we can improve the flow of these knowledges and improve the whole, ecosystems of social impact, investment, and practice. By doing so, I mentioned about understanding and knowledge, transparency and good governance, which all mean that we have to create trust among, all the players in our society. So that's the biggest challenge. I was involved in one of the earlier conference of AVPN, I think in Singapore maybe. I spoke at that forum, and I mentioned that we have had some positive experiences in creating this collaboration and understanding, but we will need to do it by 100 times more. And many years later, I think we are still in a magnitude of close to 100 times more. So we just need to capitalize and leverage on the learnings that we have had, and it's really based on this flow of knowledges and creating trust and good governance in the practice.
Thank you. Abdallah, you're using technology in some fascinating ways to maybe encourage or simplify. Can you describe for us how you're using AI specifically for charitable purposes?
I think, about a year and a half ago, there's this AI frenzy that started going around where people with ChatGPT coming out and everyone thinking, it's going to take their job and it's going to, end life as we know it. And we wanted to make a point that the same technology can be used actually to allow a lot more people to access doing good and to access whether it's philanthropy or whatever it is they're trying to execute on. Earlier, in the last days of Ramadan, we launched the world's first charity GPT, where it's much easier for people to define a purpose that they want to donate for or they want to contribute to, and within seconds they can reach the organizations or the people who are responsible for such a donation or for such a program. And I think it worked extremely well, where we get tens of thousands of people donating within minutes of launching such a program. I think a key factor that, maybe in philanthropy as well as in technology, a lot of people usually overlook is adoption. and accessibility. So technology only works if enough people can access it and enough people can use it. So again, if we go back to the room, how many people want to be good people or want to be philanthropic in that sense? There are some people that didn't raise their hands. I think we should. That's something is concerning. But everybody wants to. When we said how many people want to be good people, almost everyone raised their hands. But how many people actually donated? Maybe like 5 people donated. So everybody wants to be good. Everybody wants to do something. But a lot of the time, the means are not matched to the intent. And this is where I think technology can do a very good job, where you can match the intent and the means and make it much, much easier for people to do what they intend on doing, which basically takes away the excuse from everybody who doesn't donate, and it gives them more ability to be able to contribute. So this is a lot of what we're doing with AI, and I think it just showed people that there is another face of technology where it's not just after your job and it's not just after your career, but you can also use it to really expedite social good and social work and what have you.
And now there's going to be a lot more jobs in this sector because it's going to be easier to find these nonprofits doing the great work. What's been the response? You said right after you launched, you had great response.
So I remember, for example, last Eid, we launched a similar program of transfers and what have you, and we saw about 50 million dirhams flow within the 2 days on top of the platform. We've launched a program with the Red Crescent for support of if you remember, there was the earthquake in Turkey. And I think we've done a few million within the first hour as well with Charity GPT. I know we've done very good numbers, so they're in the millions within the past 2 days, but I haven't actually checked the exact figures with the team. But and the reason is not that we've taken this 50 million or they've taken this 100 million from one single person. This 100 million, with this 50 million came on maybe 100,000, 200,000 transactions, which means it was really everyday people that are donating 5, 10, 20 dirhams and what have you. But when you look at that, if we were good to go to Europe and ask someone to raise 50 million for a non-profit, probably take them a few years and they probably spent like 10 million of that just on the fundraising. And this is where I say that's us doing our part that we are obligated to do as a business. And if everybody took their social responsibility as seriously, I think things would look a lot better for a lot of the bigger problems we face.
I couldn't agree more. And in many countries, people look at it as a government's job. They pay high taxes, and therefore it is the government's role to contribute charitably around the world for each individual. And clearly not a concept that is embraced here. This has been a really interesting discussion, and I would love to hear from each of you as we near the end of this session. What do you see as the future of philanthropic funding and impact investing over the next decade? I'll start with you, Kunvishian.
Well, I want to present a very ambitious view on this. I think we can look at a potential exponential growth in terms of philanthropy, impact investing, scaling, leveraging interventions for impact through, I guess, two main factors. One is the younger generations, the new players of, philanthropists, people from the corporate sector, the general public, to the young generations of, practitioners, nonprofits and all. That's one factor that would hopefully allow to support my ambitious view on this. And the second is the technology, as you mentioned, digital technology, social media and all, because this will help us disseminate knowledge, understanding much faster in a more efficient and effective way. And of course, effective communications that we can use in positive manners. But of course, the two needs to be organized in a systematic manner if we target the younger generations on the both ends. And hopefully there'll be more efficient flows of knowledge and resources, financial and non-financial. I think there's a potential that we can look for exponential growth in the efforts that we are all involved with.
Thank you. Lawrence.
Yeah. I think there's too much money left on the table, too much not being deployed. A lot of people want to give, but they're not actually doing it. So I've come up to say that philanthropy is too slow and too safe in Asia. But I believe that there are new innovations, new intermediaries, new platforms that would help people get confidence in giving and to help people flow resources, funding, and including non-financial resources to the right nonprofits and programs. I think capital would be increasingly seen as a continuum. I mean, we already are seeing that convergence between what's for philanthropy and what's for commercial returns. But we should see capital as different tools, right? Sometimes you need philanthropy, sometimes you need blended capital, sometimes you need commercial capital, and you use it as is needed, even for the same project, right? At different stages. I think there'll be more. I think the ecosystem will improve. People would see the need to invest in the public goods, the capacity building, the evidence-based sort of work that will promote more giving and more confidence in giving. So I'm optimistic.
Excellent. And Abdallah.
I don't know much about the future. I'm not a futurist. I don't predict things, but I just hope everybody would leave today and just do an act of good. That could be a good start for all of us. And I think a theme that's going to happen not just in philanthropy, but across each and every different industry is disintermediation is going to start happening at a much more rapid pace. This is because a lot of the middle layers of things will not be needed anymore, given how fast computers are evolving. And I think that would, especially in philanthropy, close the gap between the giver and the taker, which means a lot of organizations that now exist, charge fees and control funds and control the flow of funds will cease to exist very quickly. But that's a theme we see across every single industry and every technology.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the entire panel, and please, let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you to our speakers, Phyllis, Abdallah, Lawrence, and Vichyen. Thank you for unpacking some key questions around closing the gap between capital and impact, the role of trust and technology in bridging this gap. And indeed, the biggest risk is doing nothing at all. We'll just give them a second to take a photo to capture this wonderful conversation. Thank you once again. Thank you, no worries. Thank you. In this next session, we delve into the fundamental importance of education in shaping the leaders of tomorrow, particularly in the context of sustainable development. Our panelists will explore a range of strategies, from community-based initiatives to public-private partnerships aimed at fostering an environment where youth are equipped with the skills and knowledge to drive positive change towards a sustainable future. So with that, please allow me to introduce our distinguished speakers. Her Highness, Princess Noof bint Muhammad bin Abdullah Al Saud, CEO and board member of the King Khalid Foundation. His Excellency Ahmed Taleb Al Shamsi, CEO of the Emirates Foundation. Dato Shahira Ahmed Bazari, Trustee and Managing Director of Yayasan Hassana. And last but not least, our moderator, Ms. Safina Hussain, founder and board member of Educate Girls.
Hello, everybody. Uh, a big round of applause for our panelists, please, as we start off. So today we're actually going to be talking about the role of education in sustainable development. I don't think any of you really, I need to tell you what an important role education plays. However, I wanted to share one story recently. I was in Rajasthan in a tiny village in Pali, and I was visiting a household where in 2008 we had found an out-of-school girl and enrolled her back into school. She's obviously a young woman today working as an Anganwadi worker. But I asked her father, I said, why do you think education is important? And it was very interesting what he said to me. He said, the world today is built for the educated. And if you're not educated, you will be exploited like animals. And honest to God, it really hit me, because it's so true. All of us are in this room, we all have a voice because we are educated. And those who are not are actually really vulnerable to exploitation. And I love the fact that this man said it so beautifully. And then, looking at just the data as well, out of school rate, lower secondary, as many as 40% of countries have made no progress since 2015. The number of children missing out on any schooling has increased by 6 million. Countries are way off track on their SDG 4 targets. Education is in a state of emergency, said the UNESCO Director General. It's incredible. So today we're going to be having this conversation with trailblazers and with people who are doing incredible work in the region around that, around SDG 4. So let me introduce you to the people who are working on this mammoth task. It's wonderful to have you here. Her Highness Princess Noof bint Mohammed bin Abdullah Al Saud. She is the CEO of the King Khalid Foundation, one of the leading nonprofit organizations in the country. She's been a member of KKF's Board of Trustees since 1996, engaging and shaping in their finances and strategy. She leads programs towards the economic and social empowerment of vulnerable groups in the country, and also leads the foundation's global thought leadership around promotion of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and protecting inclusive growth. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
We also have His Excellency Ahmed Taleb Al Shamsi. It's wonderful to have you here, sir. He has served as CEO of the Emirates Foundation since 2019, a pioneer in the field of youth empowerment. Over the last 5 years, he's led the foundation through an outstanding period of mobilization, engagement, partnership building that has firmly established the organization's long-term strategic operations. In 2023, he spearheaded further evolution within the organization, repositioning the Emirates Foundation within the UAE social sector ecosystem. Welcome.
Thank you.
We also have Dato Shahira Ahmed Bazari. She is a trustee and founding managing director of Yayasan Hassana, Malaysia's largest philanthropic foundation. They have an endowment of approximately $650 million US. She is renowned for her advocacy of partnerships and collaboration within the sector, notably during the pandemic, when Hassana, in partnership with the Ministry of Finance and private sector, distributed an impressive 5-fold increase in funds to support vulnerable communities, making a significant achievement in times of crisis. So, first question. I'm very, very, very keen to understand from all of you, and I think the audience is too, just your work in education, and what are the sort of core challenges that you're trying to solve? So, Your Highness, I'll start with you.
Thank you. And before, I'd like to just congratulate the Council and AVPN on this amazing conference. I think it's about time that we gather and convene and learn from our successes and our challenges. So thank you very much, AVPN and the Council. When we talk about education, the challenges are many and rife, and they spread the gamut from every economic system and every country, and whether you're developing, whether you're least developed or middle, it is a huge issue. For my work, it stems from my personal experience. So if you've been responsible for educating a human being, you understand the challenges, and it should not be that challenging, and it should not cost that much. So the challenges I faced was in work and in general life is addressing inequalities in education, addressing a non-inclusive education system and learning environment. And another big challenge, of course, is the general education system that is not keeping up with current needs, needless to say, future needs. And also not keeping up with the educator training programs, keeping them up to speed. So these are challenges we've faced, and we've been able to tackle some of these challenges through our advocacy programs. So we provide, or we do research papers, and we found that many of the reasons for youth dropping out of education or training is their, whether female or male, is their care responsibility. So this is one reason that we found that is quite exclusive. So we need to find solutions to have the education system encompassing of them. We've also found challenges, of course, with learning disabilities or physical disabilities. So we need educational systems that are accessible to all divergent needs. We've also worked through our investment, social investment program with reskilling, upskilling, again for current needs, and now again for environmental needs. We also advocate for lifelong learning programs within the nonprofit sector. So you need to understand that we usually, our work at the foundation encompasses always the most vulnerable. So we look at the skills that they need. Within the environment that they are living in. So I'm not going to skill somebody in a small village for a job availability in Riyadh or Jeddah. So understanding the context, understanding the environment that people live in, this is also a very big challenge that we are addressing.
My God, this is really so close to my heart as well, because inclusion is all, that I've spent my life working on. And we see the same thing in India as well, right? Caregiving duties, etc. Girls drop out, early marriage, so many things. But I think inclusion is so much at the core.
But young men too.
And young men too, yes, of course.
In care.
Yeah.
So which is quite
Actually, in secondary, we now have more boys out of school than we do girls. So yes, absolutely. And special needs that you mentioned. So I think just absolutely fantastic. His Excellency, with you I want to touch upon how the focus of the Emirates Foundation has actually changed over the years, and where does it stand today? So the challenge you're working on, but also how has that sort of shifted?
Definitely. Just before we start, maybe I'd like to thank the Council and AVPN for convening all of us, around 1,500 experts and leaders in their fields. And that by itself deserves a round of applause. We wouldn't have been here today without that. And I would just double click before I deep dive into the answers. These convenings are quite important. Yes, the motto of today is One Asia, one future. But it's easier said than done. And when we convene here, we share our expertise. The transfer of knowledge and I would say the network that is built is quite astonishing. So I think, as we close this beautiful chapter, I think a lot of partnerships and a lot of impact is going to happen from such a platform. Now, to speak of maybe the Emirates Foundation or even the UAE's effort in addressing some of the challenges. Today, maybe the last speakers in the earlier panel spoke about something which was, and I'll double click on Abdullah Abu Sheikh as a comment. People try to segment sectors over another. So when it comes to challenges, they would say this is the education sector's challenge or problem. People usually tend to say, if I can be blunt, not my monkey, not my circus. And they like to shy off from some of these challenges. It's similar to the social sector or the economic sector. Today, I think we need to acknowledge that when there's a challenge or an issue, it's not one sector over another, and that when the issue does escalate, we're all accountable. It's not one organization. It's not the public sector's mandate on its own to hold the mantle. It's not the private sector. And finally, not the third sector's role. It's actually a collective when it comes to that. And some of the work we've been doing in the foundation is trying to bring everyone together on the same page. How can we all, I would say, have a stake in addressing some of these challenges, in which education is at the forefront, because education is a pillar that is needed amongst all our sectors. When we say education also, another thing is to bridge the gap amongst the different mediums that have been introduced. And I know, Your Highness, we were talking about this quite at length before this session virtually with our colleagues, is that we need to address that there are different mediums now to reach different audiences and age groups. Some old systems, or I would say even archaic systems, won't apply for the next generation or the issues that we need to tend to at scale, whether it's reaching people at rural areas, reaching the new generation that has an attention span as short as 30 seconds, and the skills gap that we need to basically bridge for the upcoming challenges. So just in a nutshell, the foundation's effort was to bring everyone together through these, I would say, through addressing these complicated challenges and introducing innovative means, and slowly allowing everyone to digest that we can introduce things like gamification in education, things like actually alternative education or experiential education in our schooling systems or even beyond the schooling system.
Thank you. That's absolutely like sort of on the mark, right? We need to do all of those things to tackle quality. And you're right, like, I mean, my daughters do. 30-second attention span, that's all they've got, right? So how do you capture that attention span for an education? That's brilliant, thank you. Dada Shahira. What challenges?
All right.
What are the sort of challenges that you're seeing in education, and
thank you.
what's your focus?
So first of all, I wanted to thank the Council and AVPN for this invitation. I've been so inspired to understand the philosophy of charity and service of this part of the world. And I think there's a lot that we can do to actually redefine philanthropy in terms of this part of the world. Hasana, which is the foundation that I work with, which is for Arabic-speaking community, I mean, Hasana means doing good. It's got multiple dimensions in terms of how we do impact. And quite a lot of the philosophy that you carry here resonates with us back home, because we've always been anchored our giving in social justice, fairness, dignity, and generosity, which is very hard to carry when you are required to quantify everything. So thank you for that inspiration, and in some ways validation in terms of how service should be provided. Challenges in education, okay, we can't cover everything, but I think we can start with the fact that we are all getting outpaced all the time. You know, whether it's curricular, education, we're getting outpaced. We were behind even before the pandemic. With school closures after the pandemic, you know, I think we fell back even further. So how is it possible to catch up, right? There's just so many disruptions that's happening. with the generation. The alpha generation acquires knowledge very differently. The school system is struggling in fulfilling this. So I think in Hasana, the philosophy is around maximizing human potential and looking at the talent holistically. So yeah, you have the basic, cognitive foundations that you need to build in education, whether it's, the reading, writing, arithmetics, and all of that, the 3R. But really, it's so disrupted that we focus on the holistic development of the kid. And we're trying to challenge the notion that the basic KPI for this must not only be anchored on academic achievement, which is a philosophy that we all grew up with, that you're successful if first you're getting your A's and then everything else. And this has been something that we've been challenging, because there's just so much that we can get out of a talent if we approach the process of education for this talent differently. And so as a foundation, we have been focusing on that and trying to provide multi-dimensional sort of inputs to the development of a talent based on the interests and strengths of that talent. And we work across, so we have neurodiverse talents, we have girls, boys, obviously girls, boys, academically inclined, non-academically inclined, neurodiverse, right? They are in public schools, rich, poor, marginalized, rural, urban. They're all in those schools, and we try as best to actually measure the success of that individual based on what the individual perceives as success for his or herself. But it's not easy, because so we work very closely with the Ministry of Education. I mean, I always believe that, we have the traditional proverb, right? It takes a village to raise a child. Maybe we should go back to that. And gone are the days where education bureaus or Ministry of Education have all the answers. They don't. So we need to reach out and collaborate and, crowdsource. And it might reduce their budgets as well if they can work with others to achieve the objectives of learning and education in this century, I suppose. Which is very disruptive.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for reminding us that education is about educating a human being. It's not reduced to the KPI of, some metric of learning outcome, which very often happens is we just reduce education to a pass rate, or reduce education to, just that academic performance. But it has to be holistic, and it has to be it's a well-rounded human being and an individual. And I love what you said, like, you measure success based on where they wanted to be. And their own sort of, so thank you for that. Your Highness, the King Khalid Foundation focuses on capacity building by injecting fuel talent into the sector. So how does building a pipeline of future leaders become an accelerator of growth, in your opinion?
If I can also just clarify a bit, our focus really is not creating leaders. Our focus is the sector as a whole, professionalizing the sector, ensuring that it has impact. When we first started, there were less than 200 official NGOs in the country. Now they're in the tens of thousands. And the reason is, it's not that the giving has become more. It's we used to do individual giving, the saying, what your one hand gives, the other hand doesn't give. And so that is good for charity, but it is not good for impact and development. And what we do through our work is develop the capacity. So it is a very professional system. It is one that produces impact. It is one that is able to talk to funders, especially that most of the funders are business people, or it is the business community and companies, and they want to understand impact, they want to understand cost. So this is what we have been doing. And our biggest success or why we are where we are is because we are a learning organizations ourselves. In a discussion earlier this morning, I had explained that we learned from our failure at the very, very beginning. And that's where we learned that we didn't have partners on the ground that we could work with, so we stepped back and we worked on developing, because at that time the mentality was charitable. So you have to work on changing the mentality of individual givers, donors, and also on some of the more traditional older organizations to be more developmental and impact focused. So we do this through our capacity building programs. We do it through also advocating for the sector, and also trying to entice leaders or other people from other sectors to come in and to see that they can develop. The other thing is using your metaphor as fuel. So if we are vehicles, a system or a vehicle requires not only fuel, but it requires maintenance. So we are trying to always constantly learn and evolve, and addressing the needs of the future. So before, there was a lot of work that we granted, and we worked with people for remote work call centers and the such. Now, with the advance of technology, that is almost not needed, because you're going to be talking to a bot or an AI, whatever it's called. So where do we go from there? How do we skill them to be able to work with and not have these technologies as a disruptor, but a vehicle for different types of jobs and different types of opportunities?
No, that's fantastic, because you do need that. You actually need the capacity building to build the sector, to then actually get to that impact that we're looking for. And I think very often a lot of philanthropists want to go straight into funding the program versus building the environment, the platform, the ecosystem that actually can nurture that level of impact and philanthropy. So thank you for that. Dr. Shahira, my question to you is, how do you harness the power of PBPs to bring in bold changes for lasting impact? Because I know you do a lot of work in that space.
Specialist in crowdsourcing resources. So I think there's been a lot of discussions on collaborations and partnership, what makes a good collaboration. I've spoken about this many times. We always talk about being mission focused. We speak about harmonization of objectives, expectations, roles and responsibilities. I mean, these are all the little nuances. I mean, collaboration on its own sounds like a no-brainer, right? Obviously, work together, but making it a success requires a lot of leadership and ownership and walking the talk. So, egos, logos, all of this that comes into. So for us in Hasana, anytime we always come back to the mission. Why is this project important? How many kids is it going to empower? If we don't make this collaboration happen, how many children are going to get deprived of this assistance? Then it gives us perspective about signing the deal in that sense, right? So that. But what I wanted to say about PPP and where we should, we talk about all kinds of capital, but I think the thing that we all should come together on today is trust capital, which is really overrated, underrated, taken for granted, spoken a lot about, but in essence, I think trust is something that we all need to reach in and seek our own accountability on trust. And I think, I can't speak, I'm not a scholar on Islam, but in Islam we always have this thought of positive thinking, right? Husnuzun, right? Like, you've got to first trust that this person has got good intentions. And that's how you get into a partnership. But if you're always getting into a partnership with what's the catch, what am I missing, it's not so. So trust capital must be anchored with the assumption that this partnership everyone is positive in this partnership, and then respecting other people's world views and really appreciating that. So I wanted to say that we all know a lot about collaboration. We all have done collaboration, but perhaps if I could leave you with one thing to think about when you are getting into partnerships, let's trust a lot more that everyone has good intentions in the partnership and collaboration to make it happen. And we have the challenge with the system as well. I mean, how many of us have worked with different ministries and all of that? You know, they welcome philanthropic capital, but we can only go so far into the system, right? It's almost like, don't tell us how to do our jobs, you know, but yeah, you can help us with these little things, but we will continue. So even with system collaboration, there is a lot of trust deficit. So what do people like us do? You know, we've got big ambitions, um, similar outcome aspiration, but difficult to collaborate in a true manner in that sense. So I'd let you all think about trust in our own capacities.
Actually, I'd love it if you could give an example of a PPP, a collaboration that's been really successful for you.
Okay, so there's been many, but on education, I think one of the things that we've been very proud of is that we've managed to launch an alternative assessment tool for special needs kids, secondary school kids. So the government in Malaysia, the students who finish standard 6, because it's all kids goes to, it's mandatory, so whatever abilities you may have, you go to the public school, and they have an alternative assessment when you finish, when you're 12 years old. But when you get to high school, everybody sits for the same exam. And obviously, you're going to set these kids up for failure. They're not going to do well. And then the parents will ask, you know, my kids go to school for like, what, 13 years or whatever number of years, what do they get? Because that final exam, they're not getting any certificate with that. So we worked with the examination board of the Ministry of Education. It's like a 5-year plan where we had an R&D lab, and then we piloted it in schools, and it's actually so interesting when I actually saw the outcome of it. It's actually app-based assessment tool, which is 360, where the students, the teachers, the parents can actually evaluate this child. And at the end of his or her studies, they get this qualification. It's like a spider web that shows their strengths. You know, so this kid is good with, you know, with hands and doing something, or analytical skills, or very creative. So they use that for employment. So they don't just go and say, you know, usually, you know, when they finish school, they get a letter from the teacher. And the teacher says, you know, this kid is all of this. So now they have something more evidence-based, and the kid is tracked across the years that they. So that's been pretty powerful, and we worked with, and we co-created this with the examination board, which is enabled, you know, which is enabled and co-created it, and we were very happy that this, you know, I celebrate this because it's one of the many education innovation that we did that was actually adopted by the Ministry of Education and rolled out to the 10,100 schools in the country. But there were many other innovations that remain a dream for system reapplication. So that's an example of special needs education that we interview.
And that is such an overlooked area, first of all. So congratulations on that. It's really sort of underinvested in, because it's very hard to do. But I think your example also shows us that collaboration is so hard. You have to take so many people along. It requires patient capital. You can't get results tomorrow. And I think that's the reason, even though all of us want collaboration, it needs a particular kind of funding and support. Also, I feel like, you know, you said it took 5 years, it took pilots, it took so many things. But really, thank you. That's a very illustrative example. His Excellency, what are some of the potential new priorities that Emirates Foundation, that you're sort of pursuing? taking inspiration from UAE's aspirational values for the community?
One of the areas that I think is actually a worldwide challenge is a national identity of each nation. With us being a globalized world, some of the areas that are very beautiful to our hearts when it comes to our values, norms, is diminishing in a form or another. Partially because we are not addressing it in the development that's needed, whether it's the integration of technology or new means or mediums. And the second of all is because it's not unappealing. You said something beautiful that it takes a village to raise a individual. In our communities as a whole, it was quite small and intimate at a point, where everyone used to contribute to the development of each other, whether it's a person's neighbor or a family member. And with the world going at such a fast pace, the first victim is the national identity of each nation, the values and norms. And partially where we would like to focus as a foundation is how can we actually pioneer in keeping our beautiful values. Our founding father said a nation without a past is a nation without a future. So we actually hold pride in our values and our norms, and how can we actually transfer it to the next generation, given that today multimedia is actually preaching the other way or the other side, where you're actually being glorified to breaking the norms and values. And that's where the next generation is heading. How can we actually start glorifying people that actually adhere to the values that we hold dear, whether it's cultural values or even religious values? It's the basic need or fundamental of each individual, and that is something that I think not just the UAE is facing, but worldwide, so it's going to become an issue. We see this sometimes as simple as a very simple act. Once upon a time, when you see someone a bit, I would say, old or a part of the elderly community standing in the queue, it would actually be glorified to take them and put them in front. Go and stress this in the current ecosystem. You're actually going to be punished or ranted at for doing that. That's such a universal value that's not just tied to the UAE. But if we're heading towards that dangerous curve, where we have sometimes no respect to our elderly or our family members or the different segments in the community, the notion of respect or that value is something that I think is going to determine communities and I would say nations. So in a nutshell, I think we want to pioneer in introducing areas of gamification to our national identity or experiential learning. Today, actually, we're having a conversation amongst our peers with His Excellency Dr. Tariq or others. If you ask people here in Abu Dhabi, for example, would you like to go to a theme park or go to I would say, a heritage site? Usually it's the first, not the latter, because they've actually modernized how again, these either theme parks or these themed areas transfer the information, whether it's on superheroes or it's on stories. Can we take that model and adopt it to national identity or our education systems? Yes, but until when will we resist change? That's the question. Do we need to wait for it to become too late, or should we actually pioneer with that? And I think all of us here in the panel are attempting, in a form or another, to introduce these new means. But even within I would say the individuals here today, can we first address that we need a change? That's one. I think sometimes not to beat around the bush. If we want to stay with an education system that's been developed over hundreds of years, not that it's wrong, that's going to yield some certain of, I would say, limited returns in the future. Or are we willing to embrace technology, AI, media, gamification, and integrate it? Stop resisting it and actually use it as a lever rather than an obstacle. So I think partially this is some of the efforts we're trying to do, and I think it's something intriguing and again, not a safe space, because everyone is scared usually to try something new, because once you succeed, everyone's going to be there to clap for you, and if you fail, everyone's going to be there to point fingers at you. And I think that's a challenge all of us will probably see, whether it's in our positions or our organizations or our nations. So we need to create that safe space amongst each other and transfer our knowledge. Again, I said at the beginning, these convening actually, every sort of information can save you, some time, resources, or even mistakes. We need to learn amongst each other, especially in Asia. We have a similar demographics in one form or another. Culture and values and norms are actually at our forefront of our communities. So that changes the equation. We usually like to look at the Western model. That's beautiful for what applies for them. For us here, if we don't have, again, values, norms, identity within the DNA of any initiative or program we're trying to do, that's a recipe for disaster. So I'll conclude with that.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. And I think values are absolutely at the core of an education system. Again, like we were saying, like it's not about a KPI that it's your pass percentage or anything else. And I think sometimes we forget about that because it's not so measurable. So sometimes it gets overlooked or it gets packaged under a broad framework of life skills or something. But I think values is what we want our children to come out with. Values is what will make a civilized society. Values and kindness and all of those things are absolutely bedrock of a civilized, planet in that sense. So thank you for that. So now I know, we have only like around 3 minutes. So we've spoken of challenges and solutions. So I'm trying to get to one question we can do really quickly. The clock is ticking. What is the one critical investment area that you think holds a lot of potential for accelerating progress towards the SDGs? Any one that you think is a critical area of investment that you would want to pursue?
I think the first thing is the educators themselves. And this is very difficult, very capital intensive. But if we do not, we can easily focus on the sustainability of buildings. It's measurable, it's accountable, and you can really bandy out that you've done your work for the environment or for carbon capture and all of that. But that's easy, and you can get funding. The difficult part is working on valuing first teachers when they were first mu'addibs. They went beyond teaching, investing in them highly, paying them more than what we do, because we do value things that cost more, and also holding them highly accountable to their outcomes. So as we say, is in the different blended funding and all of the different mechanisms and tools, where you pay for outcomes, then you pay. It should be done also with teachers, but giving them the respect and the tools that they need.
Excellent, thank you.
I'll just echo what Her Highness just mentioned. I think let's not apply a capitalistic model to, I would say, impact. Our impact here, in the region and as Asia should be looked at in a different way. Maybe it's in investing in people, as you said, Your Highness, and I think that's an angle all of us should maybe explore. So if we invest in the people, they are going to be holding the baton and moving the SDGs, because you can have all the fancy, again, mechanisms to measure it, but who's going to be moving the needle? It's the community members and the people at the forefront.
Absolutely.
Your point reminded me when one of my board members told us to stop using the word human capital and call them human beings. Because, you're right, they're human beings. But I think for me, as I reflect on what we are doing in the education pillar, we're doing two things: school leadership culture, which Her Highness spoke about. I would then say, really, let's invest in the well-being of our young people, which is really around the emotional, mental, physical, intellectual well-being of young people, which is something that we are doing because we're already in schools, and we are seeing how, I would say sick, but how emotionally unwell they are, young people. So we've decided to invest on mental health interventions, just to support the children when they're young, so they can develop better coping mechanisms and values in life, that would help them in the future. So that's what we're doing. And while we're training the teachers, we're also helping the kids thrive and do well as young people, holistically. So mental health is what I'll look for, vote for.
Yes, thank you. So I think a lot of things we're hearing is be inclusive, invest in your teachers, make sure you make mental health values. There's so many things a priority and not just go with a very narrow lens of performance and of outcomes. So I will just end this lovely conversation with the words of Nagina Bano, who is from a village in Rajasthan, and she said to me, she says, "My education is the only thing that nobody can steal out of me, nobody can beat out of me, no flood or famine can take away. My education will be with me till my dying day." And I think that's what all of you are doing so that it can bring about a personal transformation, but also build societies and obviously the planet. So thank you.
Join me in expressing our sincere gratitude to Her Highness Princess Noof bint Muhammad bin Abdullah Al Saud, His Excellency Ahmed Taleb Al Shamsi, Dato Shahira Ahmed Bazari, and Safina Hussain for sharing their perspectives on the pivotal role of education in sustainable development. And as the speaker so aptly rounded off the conversation with, a key related issue is youth mental well-being. And so at the AVPN 2023 conference, we launched the Youth Mental Wellbeing Fund to increase mental well-being services to youth across the region. Next, we will hear from our speakers on this crucial issue. I am honored to introduce our panelists who will be leading us through this conversation. Let me start with introducing His Excellency Aryo Bimo Nandito Aryo Tejo, Minister of Youth and Sports, Republic of Indonesia. Mr. Rob Rosen, Director of Philanthropic Partnerships at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and our moderator, Ms. Matushi Sengupta, Chief of Capital Mobilization at AVPN. Speakers, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for gathering around for such an important discussion. I'd like to thank His Excellency Minister Dito and Rob to be participating in this conversations. And can I request my participants to come up in front if you can. We don't want to lose the wisdom that my panelists will be sharing. So would request you to please come if you can. Starting on, I'd like to dive onto the subject right away. I'll start with Rob. Rob, I know, this is something that I think is increasingly coming to focus, this challenge of the well-being, mental well-being for the youth as such, and we approach it from different angles. We've been trying to figure out the scale, the magnitude of it. So from your perspective and where you sit as such, I really wanted to understand from you, where you are approaching it from. How has this become such an important issue to address? And what can the international community do to be able to address this phenomena?
Great, thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. It's a true privilege to be here in Abu Dhabi. So by way of introduction, my name is Robert Rosen, and I head philanthropic partnerships at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And interestingly, as you think about the work of the foundation, we're very visible for our work in global health, but that's focused mainly on infectious disease. But I think there's been a recognition of the role that health systems play and integrated health solutions play across the board, and that unfortunately, mental health has been vastly underappreciated, underrecognized, and underinvested in by both government health systems and to some degree philanthropists, and that there's a huge opportunity. Now, sometimes it takes a terrible thing to shine a light on an opportunity, and I think we experienced that through COVID, not just the firsthand health challenges, but all of the knock-on effects. And clearly, mental health issues rose to the forefront. And one of the things I want to do just as we get into this conversation is actually ground this on a personal level.
Yeah.
As a parent, I'm a parent of 3 children. I experienced firsthand the challenges that can arise and did arise in my family because of COVID. And I share this not to generate a great deal of empathy, but actually just to say that we've got to be willing, first off, to talk about these issues. So my middle child, who's now 13, was a very mature 9, 10-year-old as this all started. And what we hadn't realized is he was internalizing all of the conversations and all of the fears and all of the tensions that we were experiencing in the family. And he would very quietly disappear in his room at night and just fall flat. And this is a very empathetic, engaged, gregarious, fun child. He had internalized it so much that he got in a really brutal cycle and was in a very challenging place. But circumstantially, we live in Seattle. We have access to incredible mental health care, both in terms of psychology and psychiatry. We, particularly my wife, was very quick to recognize what we were dealing with and take it seriously, and we took the steps that we needed. He got the support that he needed, and he's doing fine, although it is an ongoing thing that he has to continue to address. But if you step back and look at the statistics, in the Western world, even in a much more severe case than he experienced, it's less than 50% likelihood that you're going to have access and follow through the treatment that you need. There's a shortage of providers. There are still challenges even in terms of coverage for these types of services, and they are underdiagnosed. Yeah. In the Global South, you're now talking about a 75 to 80% situation in terms of undiagnosed critical health issues. And the consequences of those health issues left undiagnosed and untreated are utterly tragic on the human scale, and even more broadly, if you step back and look at it from an economic scale, it is causing massive harm. The good news is there are solutions, and we're starting to recognize how to bring those forward. But it's going to take deep partnership, collaboration between government, philanthropists, and others to actually take this on in the way that we need to. And so I hope we can get into that through the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I think the whole, your point about talking about these issues is such an important one to bear in mind as we move forward. Thank you for that. His Excellency Minister Dito, I just wanted to ask from your perspective, I think all countries suffered on account of the pandemic as such, especially from a mental well-being front. Please share with us, where your government and, how have you approached the problem?
Yeah, so there's definitely a significant spike in number of mental health issue in Indonesia post-pandemic. Before the pandemic, it only hits about 17.3% of Indonesia youth between age 16 to 30 years old. And then after the pandemic, it's increased to 34.9% post-pandemic about the mental issue. For information, age between 16 and 30 years old in Indonesia is around 60 million. Wow. So it's very big. There's a huge numbers of generation, and nationwide increased number of youth mental health issue in Indonesia. The availability of the psychological clinic in Indonesia is still very much accumulate in the big city, especially centered in the islands of Java. Java is our capital is Jakarta. Mm-hmm. And in evidence, Jakarta had 598 clinic psychologists with a ratio of 1 one of clinical psychologists serving around 16,000 residents, while at the same time in North Tenggara Timur, NTT is next to Bali, only had 13 clinical psychologists, each serving 435,000 residents. To begin with, Indonesian youth, especially the Gen Z, has a better awareness of mental health issue, which not only encourage to be more focal on the issue, but also reassure them to look past the stigmas surrounding a mental health issue that are still faced every day in Indonesia. And Indonesia youth have the tendency to be more receptive. They see the importance of seeking help for themselves and also in advocating the need of others around them. Hence, the rising number of youth mental health issue in Indonesia post-pandemic automatically drive the demand for mental health support all over Indonesia. Our government, through the Ministry of Youth and Sport, included clinical psychology and psychiatry service in the government, in our ministry. Also subsidized on health insurance, so that should at least answer the challenge of affordability. From this, we can conclude that we are still most struggling to answer the challenge of facilitating adequate mental health service nationwide.
Thank you so much. Thank you for highlighting for us the scale and magnitude of the issue. I mean, the numbers are mind-boggling, and this is what has already been reported. It just is a tip of an iceberg. As we understand, there is probably requirement for much more help, and thank you for your support to the cause as such. So just following on from that, Minister Dito, I just wanted to ask, if you could tell us a little bit more about the Ola Rasa program that you have actually put in place, and where is it that you are seeing action actually creating impact, and if there are specific areas that you think which need more attention from the government's perspective.
Yeah, so our Ministry of Youth and Sports have been trying our best to answer this challenge to provide nationwide specialized mental health service that for youth. Our program, Olah Rasa means Olah is like creating or managing. Rasa is feels. So it's like mind and feels. The Olah Rasa is aimed to answer the three principal action: promotive, curative, and rehabilitative, and preventive. We actively engage the Indonesia youth for promotional action through a social media campaign and big activation in events. On the other hand, we facilitate curative and rehabilitative action through offline and online clinic operation and management. So we are planning to enhance our online service to answer accessibility and disparity issues. Furthermore, we also try to answer the challenge through facilitating nationwide counselor training, complement with a specialized mental health module, dissemination to enhance grassroots level penetration to Indonesia youth in different regions of Indonesia. Through our Olah Rasa, we are also trying to create an ecosystem of supportive youths that will establish a safe space within Indonesia youths for mental well-being.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And good to hear that you are now trying to reach out to a much larger geography.
Yeah, for sure. I hope after this, Bill and Gates Foundation can support us in Indonesia.
Rob, there is a direct ask as it can get. Absolutely, absolutely. I do have a question on that as well. So Rob, just to bring your attention back to this whole issue of, from your foundation's perspective, I mean, that's a beautiful segue actually. What are you thinking in terms of the set of actions that would be required to address this challenge which is sort of looming large in the horizon at this point in time? So if you could tell us more about your foundation's own commitment and how you're addressing it.
Absolutely. Let me speak to it from a sector perspective, and then we can bring it back to the foundation, which is first, and you saw this if you were in the last panel where we finished on, it was a panel on education, and mental health came up. And I think holistically as a sector, we have to think a little bit less vertically and quite a bit more horizontally. And I'll be candid, at the Gates Foundation, we are organized in a very vertical way. We think about our work in global health. Yes, there is a continuum of upstream discovery all the way down to delivery, but we organize ourselves by disease. So you've got the team working on addressing malaria, you've got the team working to eradicate polio, and so on and so forth. And that's extraordinarily helpful in terms of focus, but we also have to look at the systems level in a cross-cutting way, not just across health to think holistically, but to think about how mental health touches on so many other issues. And I would also have heard and would love to continue to hear from those who are implementers on the ground. In so many of these important areas, the mental health and well-being of the implementers is crucial. I was with a colleague the other day who's doing just extraordinary, a partner who's doing extraordinary work dealing with marginalized communities, and recognized that she had to take a pause because she had internalized so much of what was going on. So first off, I think we can't just treat these things as separate verticals. We've got to think horizontally, and mental health cuts across all that we do. That's one. So I think we as a foundation are starting to get more thoughtful about it, because the first answer we might say is, we focus on infectious disease. Of course, we also focus on mental health. It's just done in a different way that is much more cross-cutting. In terms of what's possible here and what needs to happen, I think there are a couple areas. First off, this is an area that almost universally has been underaddressed by governments, and so it's wonderful to hear. I mean, the scale that you're dealing with, Minister, is extraordinary. Government approaches, both in terms of funding and innovation, have to evolve, and so I think there's a role for philanthropists to think about advocacy and addressing some of these policies that absolutely need to change, and there's a myriad of things that can be done in that space. And then the second component, and the scale that you spoke about in terms of mental health professionals per population, I mean, that is a daunting challenge. And this is where we at the Gates Foundation fall back on two things: data and innovation as grounding on this. But the data tells you that we must drive innovation in this space, and this is where I think there's continuing opportunity for philanthropy to come in and think about, how do we take advantage of some components? I mean, you're not going to, and never would want to replace professional providers, but are there steps that can be taken in terms of even just recognition? So whether that's in the schools and training counselors, training teachers to recognize part of the problem, how do we bring AI and other technology into this to help enhance the outreach and connection so that people can ultimately get the deep care that they need? And a final piece that I'd share on this that the foundation does work on, because I have the privilege of leading our philanthropic partnerships team, which is really about crowding in many different funders, including from the philanthropy space. How can we, and this again was the theme of the last panel, so it's great to see how they carry over, foster collaborations, whether that's public-private partnerships or collaborations amongst funders, to recognize. I mean, I think the moment is here. Just in the past 5 weeks, I've taken 3 different trips to parts of Asia, and you sort of have a listening mode in terms of what issues are popping up. And I will say, for the first time, mental health seemed to be near the top of that list, and so there's a window of opportunity where there's a strong interest, there's a recognition. And I would look. It's great that AVPN's doing work in this space. I would look for others to figure out how can you coalesce, because it's a bit of a daunting space as a funder to think, how do I want to get into this, because it touches everything, but how do I actually embed it in a way that is addressing some of the key challenges? And I do think there are opportunities here. I don't know, in terms of the minister's request of where the Gates Foundation could fit in, but I am certain that there are other funders who can and should be a part of this for you.
No, thank you for that. And I think the point that you make is really well taken. Last year, AVPN launched the Youth Mental Wellbeing Fund. We put out a call for proposals, and we really had a very, very rich set of applications which came to us. And we wish really hard that there were many more funders who had joined to help us deploy that support to these organizations. And much more needs to be done. There's no question about it. So I'll join the minister in strengthening that ask that, BMGF and others consider this for as an area of. But also the second point, I feel that sometimes weaving in the idea of mental well-being in your existing programs can be even more challenging. It's really difficult to build out a framework which sort of addresses this issue as such. So I really appreciate the fact that you're now trying to look at this. And I understand there's the accelerator program as well.
Yeah, I was gonna come back to that in our goalkeepers work accelerator on mental health, and I think we're crowding in both the advocacy and the visibility piece is quite prominent in this, and I think there's more to be done on the innovation side. But part of this is helping funders and others realize that this is not, in some ways we've done ourselves a favor by having the visibility coming out of COVID, because I think it made it a little bit more tangible for everybody because they experienced this collectively in some way or another. But it's not the easiest thing, and as you've had your fund and have had to navigate that, to get both funders and implementers to really think about the intersectionality. And so I push us to continue to find ways around the continuum of everybody involved in the system, right? So if they're going back to education, if they're a student, they're also, you need them to be not just, have the proper nutrition, have the proper, health, and that health also must include mental health so that they're ready to learn, or otherwise the efforts that are being put forward are going to underachieve. Same thing for the teachers, same things for the administrators, and this touches every aspect of life. And from a youth perspective, and I'm sure the minister's seen this as well, in terms of what are other engagement opportunities in addition to school and beyond school where this is holistically looked after.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that. Can't agree with you more in terms of, how do you bring the voices together. Minister Ditto, I just wanted to ask from your perspective, what type of ecosystem action do you think is necessary in terms of looking at how do you create a conducive environment for action in terms of the other stakeholders who need to start engaging with this issue much more meaningfully as such. So I'd love to hear your views in terms of, how you are thinking about it.
Yeah. So we fully acknowledge that safeguarding the mental well-being of Indonesian youth demands multi-stakeholders collaboration, especially to facilitate an equally adequate mental health infrastructure nationwide. We have engaged in our collaboration with several institutions, communities, and foundations in Olah Rasa. For promotional action, we have primarily partner with our mental platform is called Menjadi Manusia. It's Indonesia youth community advocating for mental health well-being through different means of media, from daily social media to podcasts. In YouTube, they have around like 2.5 million followers. And majority of creative and rehabilitative actions are in collaboration with Able.id and Indonesian youth community, focusing on facilitating rehabilitation for youths with mental health issue. Last but not least, preventive action are carried out alongside Genre Indonesia. It's another Indonesia youth community under our National Population and Family Planning Board, Indonesia institution that are responsible for population control, and existing collaboration with our esteemed partner community and institution have once again highlight the importance of collaboration in tackling youth mental issue in Indonesia. And then we see the immediate importance of collaborating with the international stakeholder, especially in enhancing the impact of the initiative we have carried so far, and we are eager to explore possible collaboration with the stakeholders that attending this conference with us today as well.
Thank you for that. It means a lot to have that type of support from government
Yeah.
and for making the space available. Thank you for participating and helping us resolve the challenge as such. Um, Rob, the same question to you really in terms of from where you are sitting, from your own perspective, how do you think the ecosystem needs to start responding to this malaise and trying to create a meaningful action and a pathway for change?
Yeah, I think it's consistent with a lot of what we've heard throughout the last couple days. One is thinking on a systems level, unquestionably, and so the role of various stakeholders in all of this and thinking about it holistically, we too often get vertical. The second is we know we need innovation. We know that government has a crucially important role in this in terms of funding programs, but this is where philanthropic capital can play such a critical role in terms of driving, taking some of the risk capital that we need to find solutions that can actually scale. Because we're not going to get our way out of this problem that we finally internalized and recognized, in a way. It's not, yes, it might have been exacerbated by COVID, but really all of these problems existed, they were just more hidden. And so now that we've brought it to the surface, we're going to need to work holistically on this. And so I go back to some of the higher level themes of all the conversations over the past couple days, which is how do we take the potential of philanthropy, which is extraordinary, and if you look at the capital that exists where we're sitting and throughout Asia, it is not a capital shortage. There is unquestionably enough capital. It is a choice challenge and a support opportunity. And so I think that's up to us collectively as something we can carry away from this. It's the work that we do and do with many extraordinary partners throughout this region all the way across Asia in terms of being the platforms and the providers that actually serve as a mechanism to unlock philanthropic capital. So what do we need to do? There's capital there are solution providers. There's a gap in terms of the flows. And so, I congratulate AVPN on launching this. I would love to see more people get into it. We have to come up with better systems to shine a light on the opportunities and really to inspire and support donors to take the bold action. Ultimately, you're dealing with you could walk out of here feeling overwhelmed by choice as a funder. Just in the last hour, hearing about the incredible opportunities and wonderful work in education, hearing about mental health, so many other issues that have come up. Let's not let that be the thing that paralyzes us. Let's let that be the thing that motivates us and actually gets the flows. And that's from all donors. It's not just a wealthy donor problem. It is not just an opportunity left for governments. It is an opportunity for all of us to actually, you can step back and look at the world and be overwhelmed by the challenges that we're facing. And it's easy to get a little bit depressed about that. But I think you can flip it and see, not just in terms of specific issue area solutions, but so many of the different mechanisms that have come up. I'm looking at a friend in the front row in terms of measuring outcomes, in terms of actually structuring these opportunities in a way where a donor ultimately can be incredibly confident that their capital is going to make not just a difference, but actually drive outcomes that are going to change the world for the better.
Thank you so much. In many ways, I feel that, mental well-being is almost an apex indicator. So many things have to come together and, so many things we take for granted, and which is what I think the pandemic actually really threw up for attention to say that, okay, fine, you need to be aware that things have to be in place for you to be in a space of mental well-being as such. And I think folks who have had personal experience with this whole situation sort of have started to understand the scale and what it can do or what it prevents people from doing if there is lack of it as such. But also like a challenge which is sort of just opening up. I think we don't have many solutions available at hand. We don't have many actors who are present who know exactly. It's different from a regular disease where you might have a vaccination in place. A mental well-being doesn't lend itself to approaches like that as such. And so we need, I think, far higher level of thoughtfulness and understanding as to how do we create the conditions that can actually help nurture a scenario like that. So I just wanted, I mean, last question really to the panel to say that, from your own personal perspective, could you tell me 2 or 3 things that you think would really make a difference in this space as such? It's a new challenge, which is getting added to the list of challenges that I think as development practitioners, we are currently dealing with as such. So from your perspective, from your space, happy to start with, okay.
I can't go back to, okay. I will take the ball, as we say. Yeah, it's a great question. I think I'd go back to a couple things that have to come together to see great change happen. I think it is a combination of a strategy, like really a holistic strategy that thinks both vertically and horizontally about where this challenge is embedded in other aspects where philanthropy and overall civil society plays a role. 2, voice. And this is a trickier area, right? There's still, in 2024, there's still a stigma attached to this, and it sometimes is overt, and sometimes it's a soft one. And there is a norming, frankly, that I experienced myself in raising these things. And it's not purely a generational issue that is just passed. There still is a challenge with it because it's more challenging sometimes to measure and to understand and to explain and really surface, why is it that I feel unwell and what does that mean? And is that just, literally me being in my head? And so I think we've got to put a voice, first off, to destigmatize this. It's ridiculous. I mean, this is physical health. They are linked to the links between gut-brain health, so many other issues. And, all of the, whether it is due to a specific trauma or just a chronic situation, we don't need to be fixated on the why and more get back to the how are we going to address this. So I think putting a voice to it, but then putting a voice to philanthropists, to governments, to other players in the sector to say the status quo, going back to the stats that I had, which is, the odds are that 80% of somebody with a severe mental health issue, it's 80% likelihood that it will never get addressed. That's not tolerable. And so we've got to put a voice to elevate and raise that and say this is not good enough. And the third element, so strategy, voice, funds, driving innovation in the space and driving the outcomes that we need and driving the systems to diagnose, support, treat, come up with new treatments, come up with holistic ways of addressing this and calling upon all that we know, whether it's pharmacological, therapeutic, more traditional I mean, there's so many different ways that this can come holistically that we've got to be able to do that together. So let's come up with great strategies, get the voice, and please, let's see the funds flow.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Really appreciate and really can't agree more. I think the stigma is still very much present. So giving it voice and, strategy would make a huge difference. Minister.
Yeah, I agree with him that in Indonesia, the stigma is really, really hard because I think the mental health issue, the awareness of the mental health issue has just been like this the past 5 years. The people, the youth can speak up about the mental. So right now, our strategy is how we push the human resource for the psychiatrists and psychologists and the voice to encourage for the youth that we have mental health issues that it's normal, is standard things to go to the psychiatrist or psychologist. So this is the main problem in Indonesia and the main factor that right now we are pushing to make this mental health issue is a normal thing. Like that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I mean, just the recognition, awareness, I think we're all getting there, but yes, probably more speed, more support, and more human resources to look for. No, I'd just like to sort of summarize to say that, I think this is an area which is sort of really, really taking up a lot of mental space now within the development community as well, because you understand the impact or the lack of impact it can actually, I don't know. All right. So I think that's really important to acknowledge for ourselves, but much needs to be done. I'd really like to thank Minister Dito for his thoughtful interventions and his thoughts. And thank you for the good work. Wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Rob, thank you very much for your thoughts. Really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please join me in expressing our heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed panelists, His Excellency Aryo Bimo Nandito Aryo Tejo, Minister of Youth and Sports, Republic Indonesia, Mr. Rob Rosen, Director of Philanthropic Partnerships at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and our moderator, Ms. Matushi Sengupta, Chief of Capital Mobilization at AVPN. Thank you so much for that conversation. And with that, we have now come to a close for the morning plenary. While the plenaries may have closed, the conference is not yet over. Sessions and workshops covering topics from equitable green transition, women's economic empowerment, financial inclusion, and South by South learning, impact management will resume after lunch at 2:30. As we conclude, we extend our appreciation once more to our main partner, the United Arab Emirates Presidential Court's International Humanitarian and Philanthropic Council, under the patronage of His Highness Sheikh Tayyab bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, as well as host partners Reaching the Last Mile, Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan Foundation, and Zayed Charitable and Humanitarian Foundation, and all other partners for making this year's conference our best and most inclusive one yet. I realize I now stand before you and lunch, and some of you are already making your way to lunch. Similar to the past 2 days, lunch will be held at both St. Regis and Park Hyatt. Please book your seat at any of the 6 lunch locations as you have been doing, and you will see this on the app. Please also exit via door 1 for lunch venues at St. Regis, including Olea, Martzi, and Vision Lounge 1. Door 2 and 3 for lunch venues at Park Hyatt, including the Cafe, Mate, and Vision Lounge 2, via shuttle bus, and door 4 for the networking lounge at St. Regis. Please also open the app and leave us your thoughts and feedback on our survey. We would love to hear from you as we look ahead to AVPN Conference 2025. I'm signing off as the MC for this morning, and on behalf of AVPN, I would like to thank everyone for your participation. We look forward to having more conversations with you soon. Safe travels back home. Thank you.